Chapter 12. The Power of Stories. The demon was never seen again. He retreated to his own world, carrying his grief with him. But the stories he had spared continued to spread, passed from storyteller to storyteller, generation to generation. The merchant died, an old man surrounded by his children and grandchildren. His last words were a blessing for the 3 old men who had saved him. They had taught him something important. Words are more powerful than swords. Stories can change the course of a life. A good tale, told at the right moment, can make even a demon pause. And somewhere across the veil that separates the world of humans from the world of jinn, the demon sat in his dark kingdom and remembered the night 3 old men walked out of a forest and taught him that mercy was not a weakness. He had carried his grief for 1,000 years. The stories had given him something he had never expected, a reason to let go. The demon leaned back in his throne of shadow and smiled. It was the first time he had smiled since his son died. The end. A merchant sits beneath a tree, eating dates and thinking nothing of it, when a demon appears and declares that he must die. The merchant throws a date pit into the air, and that small act of carelessness kills the demon's son. Now the merchant must find a way to survive an ancient creature of smoke and fire, using nothing but the power of a good story. Chapter 1. The Date Pit. The merchant's name is not important because what happened to him could have happened to anyone. He was a man of moderate wealth and moderate ambition, traveling from one city to another with a caravan of goods. He had been on the road for weeks, and on this particular afternoon he stopped to rest beneath a large walnut tree beside a quiet stream. He unpacked some bread and cheese. He drank water from the stream. And for dessert he ate a handful of dates that he had bought from a vendor in the last town. The dates were sweet and sticky. He ate them slowly, savoring each one, and tossed the pits aside without thinking. One of the pits hit something. It made a sound, not the sound of a pit hitting the ground, but the sound of a pit hitting flesh. The merchant looked round. He saw nothing. He shrugged and ate another date. A voice spoke from the empty air. It was not a human voice. It was deep and cold, and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You have killed my son." The merchant stood up, terrified. The air in front of him shimmered. A form took shape. It was a demon, enormous and terrible, with skin the color of dying embers and eyes that burned with yellow fire. The demon held something in his hands. The merchant looked closer, and his blood froze. The demon was holding a small body, the body of a young creature, barely formed, with a date pit embedded in its throat. The merchant had thrown a pit into the air. The pit had struck the demon's son, who had been invisible, floating in the shade of the tree. The merchant had killed a creature he did not even know existed. Chapter 2. The Demon's Grief. The demon's name was a sound that no human throat could form. He was ancient, older than most of the mountains in that part of the world. He had fathered this son after centuries of solitude, and the child had been his only joy. The demon held the small body against his chest and wept. His tears were drops of liquid fire that sizzled when they hit the ground. The merchant watched in horror, unable to move, unable to speak. He had killed a being he could not see. He had committed a crime without even knowing it was a crime. The demon looked at him. His grief had turned to rage. "You will die for this," he said. "You will die, and your death will be slow, and I will watch every moment of it." The merchant fell to his knees and begged for mercy. He explained that he had not seen the child. He had not known anyone was there. He had been eating dates, nothing more, and the pit was just a pit. The demon was unmoved. "My son is dead," he said. "Your ignorance does not bring him back. You have 1 year to put your affairs in order, 1 year to say goodbye to your family, 1 year to prepare. At the end of that year, I will find you, and I will kill you." The demon vanished, taking his son's body with him. The merchant sat beneath the tree, alone, trembling, his dates scattered in the dirt around him. He had 1 year to live. Chapter 3. The Year of Goodbyes. The merchant returned to his family and told them everything. His wife wept. His children clung to him. His neighbors whispered behind his back. A man condemned to death was a strange presence in a community of ordinary people living ordinary lives. The merchant spent the year preparing. He put his finances in order, making sure his family would be taken care of after he was gone. He wrote letters to his children to be read after his death. He visited every friend and relative he had, saying goodbye to each one. As the end of the year approached, the merchant grew quieter. He stopped eating, he stopped sleeping. He sat in his courtyard and stared at the sky, waiting for the demon to appear. His wife begged him to run. He refused. The demon would find him wherever he went. There was no escape. On the last day of the year, the merchant kissed his children one final time. He walked to the tree where the accident had happened, sat down beneath it, and waited for the demon to arrive. He did not have to wait long. Chapter 4. The Demon Returns. The demon appeared at sunset. His form was even larger than the merchant remembered, and his eyes burned with fresh rage. The year of waiting had done nothing to cool his anger. If anything, it had made it worse. He looked at the merchant with contempt. "You are a brave man to come back here," he said. "Most would have tried to run." The merchant shook his head. "Running would not have saved me. You would have found me. And I wanted to die in the place where my life ended." The demon raised his hand. The merchant closed his eyes, and then an old man walked out of the forest. He was leading a gazelle on a rope. He stopped when he saw the demon and the merchant. He looked at them calmly, as if demonic executions were an everyday occurrence in his life. "Excuse me," he said. "I could not help but notice that something important is about to happen. Before you kill this man, would you allow me to tell a story?" The demon lowered his hand. He was intrigued. "A story?" he said. "What kind of story?" The first old man smiled. "A story about a gazelle and a wife who could not be trusted. A story about a punishment that was worse than death. A story that might change the way you see the world." The demon considered this. He had a weakness for stories. All ancient beings do. He sat down on a rock and told the old man to begin. Chapter 5. The First Old Man's Tale. The old man with the gazelle sat down and began his story. He was a merchant himself, he said, and he had been married to a woman who was not what she seemed. She was beautiful and charming in public. In private, she was cold and cruel. She resented his success. She envied his freedom. She was a sorceress. He did not know this when he married her. He only discovered it after their first child was born. She had transformed his own son into a gazelle, using a spell she had learned from a demon even older than this one. The old man wept as he told the story. He had searched for a cure for years. He had consulted wise men and healers and priests. None of them could break the spell. The gazelle was his son. He had been leading it through the forest for years, hoping to find someone who could help. The demon listened. The merchant listened. The gazelle stood quietly, its eyes fixed on the old man with an expression that seemed almost human. "You have suffered," the demon said. "Your story has merit. The time I would have spent killing this merchant, I will instead spend thinking about your tale. You may go." The old man thanked the demon and led the gazelle away. The demon turned back to the merchant. "You have bought yourself a little more time," he said, "but only a little." Chapter 6. The Second Old Man. As the demon was about to raise his hand again, a second old man emerged from the forest. He was leading 2 black dogs on a chain. He saw the demon and the merchant and stopped. "Before you kill this man," he said, "I would like to tell you a story. A story about 2 brothers and a pair of black dogs. A story that might interest you." The demon sighed. He was beginning to think that this forest was full of old men with stories. But he was curious. He agreed to listen. The second old man sat down and began. He had been a wealthy merchant, he said, with a younger brother who was lazy and irresponsible. The younger brother had squandered his inheritance and come begging for help. The older brother, being generous, had given him money to start a business. The younger brother succeeded beyond all expectations. He became rich. He forgot who had helped him. He turned against his brother. He tried to destroy him. The 2 black dogs, the old man explained, were his brother's daughters. The younger brother's wife had been a sorceress, just like the wife in the first story. She had transformed the daughters into dogs after the younger brother died, leaving them bound to the old man's care. The demon listened with growing attention. 2 stories, 2 cases of sorcery and betrayal. This was becoming interesting. Chapter 7. The Old Man and the Dogs. The second old man continued his story. He had been searching for a way to break the spell on the dogs for years. He had consulted magicians and wise women. He had traveled to distant lands. Nothing worked. Then, one day, a wandering dervish had told him the secret. The spell could only be broken if a man of pure heart willingly took the curse upon himself. The old man had offered himself immediately. The dervish had performed the ritual. The curse had transferred from the dogs to the old man. The dogs had become human again for a single day. They had embraced their uncle. They had wept with joy. And then the old man had begun to transform. He had become a dog himself, trapped in the body of a beast, just as his nieces had been. But the dervish had not abandoned him. He had found a second ritual, a more powerful one that could break the curse completely, without transferring it. He had performed it at midnight, under the light of a full moon. The old man had become human again. The dogs had remained dogs, free of the curse, but still in their animal forms. The old man had chosen to keep them with him, to care for them, to love them as family. They were all he had left. The demon was moved. He had not expected to feel sympathy for a human. He told the old man he could go. The merchant had gained another reprieve. Chapter 8. The Third Old Man. A third old man emerged from the forest. He was leading a mule loaded with sacks of grain. He looked at the demon and the merchant and sat down without being invited. "I have a story," he said, "and I think you will want to hear it." The demon was amused. 3 old men, 3 stories. This forest was more interesting than he had expected. He agreed to listen. The third old man began. He had been married to a woman who was kind and loving, he said. They had been happy for many years, But she had a secret. She was not human. She was a jinniyah, a female jinniyah, who had fallen in love with him and chosen to live as a mortal. They had children together. They built a life. The old man had never been happier. But the jinniyah's family had discovered her secret. They had come to take her back to the world of jinn. She had refused to go. A war had broken out between the jinn who wanted to protect her and the jinn who wanted to punish her. In the end, she had been taken against her will. The old man had been left alone with their children and a broken heart. He had spent years trying to find a way to bring her back. He had failed. The mule, he said, was not a mule. It was his wife's sister, transformed into a beast by the same jinn who had taken his wife away. He kept her with him because she was the last link to the woman he had loved. Chapter 9. The Demon's Decision. 3 stories. 3 old men. 3 tales of love and loss and betrayal. The demon sat in silence for a long time, processing what he had heard. The fire in his eyes had dimmed. The rage that had sustained him for a year was beginning to cool. He looked at the merchant, who was still kneeling on the ground, his face wet with tears. The demon spoke. Your crime was an accident, a moment of carelessness that could have happened to anyone. My son is still dead. Nothing can bring him back. But I have listened to these stories, and I have seen that humans are more complicated than I believed. The demon made a decision. He would not kill the merchant. He would let him live, but the merchant would have to spend the rest of his life telling the stories he had heard tonight. He would have to travel from city to city, telling the tale of the date pit and the demon and the 3 old men. He would be a storyteller for the rest of his days. The merchant agreed without hesitation. He would tell the stories. He would tell them until his voice gave out. He would make sure that no one forgot the night a demon spared a man's life because 3 old men had walked out of a forest. The demon nodded. He rose into the air. His form dissolved into smoke. And then he was gone. Chapter 10. The Merchant's Journey. The merchant returned to his family. His wife screamed when she saw him. She had assumed he was dead. His children ran to him and clung to his legs. He held them and wept. He kept his promise to the demon. He began traveling from city to city, telling the story of the date pit and the 3 old men. He stood in marketplaces and public squares, gathering crowds with his voice. He told the story of the sorceress wife and the gazelle son. He told the story of the treacherous brother and the black dogs. He told the story of the jinniyah bride who was taken back to her world. The crowds listened in silence. They wept at the sad parts. They gasped at the shocking parts. They cheered when the demon showed mercy. The merchant became famous throughout the land. He was invited to palaces. He was welcomed by kings and princes. He never grew tired of telling the stories. Each time he told them, he found new details, new meanings, new ways to make the listeners feel what he had felt on that night beneath the walnut tree. Chapter 11. The Palace of the King. The merchant was eventually summoned to the palace of a great king. The king had heard about the storyteller who had been spared by a demon, and he wanted to hear the stories for himself. The merchant stood before the throne and told his tales. The king was deeply moved. He had never heard anything like them. He asked the merchant to stay at the palace as his official storyteller. The merchant accepted. He had been traveling for years. He was tired. He wanted to rest. He lived in the palace for the rest of his life. He told the stories to the king's children and grandchildren. He taught other storytellers to tell them. The stories spread across the kingdom and beyond, crossing borders and seas, living on long after the merchant himself was gone. But the merchant never forgot the demon. He never forgot the 3 old men who had saved his life with nothing but words. He told their stories with gratitude and respect, giving honor to the strangers who had walked out of a forest at exactly the right moment.